I was pre-law.
Well, my goodness,
Science would have been good pre-law.
We got about a
it's
minute.
quieting down. I'm assuming Bill is back there, behind the
Somebody
screen.
knock.
Bill was leaving, so I'm.
He just
thinking-
knocked, so
Oh.
he's
I
ready.
see it.
All right.
Bill was pulling
Bill-
out as I was coming in.
Bill gave
me
So I'm
some
thinking Maybe
legion.
Michael's back
Oh,
there.
all right. Okie dokie.
but I can go look if anybody cares.
No, that's all
just
right.
knocked.
I'll know when the meeting's over who it is.
When he leaves. That's it, I'm done.
Okay. It is, ladies and gentlemen, Wednesday, March 16th, and I'm going to call the special Board of Commissioners meeting to order. If we would all rise for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Bonnie, if you'd call the roll, please.
Wheelock,
Yes, ma'am.
Lathrop,
Here.
Kropa,
Here?
Johnson,
Here.
Crawford. Here. Klaus,
Here.
Max Bauer.
Here. The first item on our agenda is public comment. Bonnie, will you please read the rules?
Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners which is required to be open to the public under the provision of the Michigan Open Meetings Act. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. Any person wishing to address the board shall state his or her name and address. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions, if any. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. The chairperson may, at his or her discretion, extend the amount of time any person is allowed to speak. Public comment will be solicited during the 2 public comment periods noted in Rule 5.4, Order of Business. However, public comment will generally be received at any time during the meeting regarding a specific topic currently under discussion by the board. Members of the public wishing to comment shall raise their hand or pass a note to the clerk in order to be recognized and shall not address the board until called upon by the chairperson.
Okay, at this time, would anyone like to make public comment? Please step forward to the podium, if you would give us your name and address.
Sure. My name is Jeremy Hogue, and my address is 3962 Vista Park in Garfield Township. And I want to, first of all, thank you guys for your service. It's a tough job that you've got going on. I work for the Friend of the Courts office, so in terms of which contract we're talking about, it'd be the Circuit Court Association. I just want to briefly mention a contract that was signed in 1997, so 19 years ago, about 2 decades. Grand Traverse County cost of living adjustment was sacrificed for the purchase of the retirement package the employees hired up to 12/31/2015 currently have. That cost of living adjustment was sacrificed to add the riders E2 and FAC3, specifically the riders that are being discussed with respect to being changed. 3 years that group of employees sacrificed their cost of living adjustment, 1997, 1998, 1999. County administration and commission said at that time that sacrificed cost of living adjustment would provide the funding that was required for those riders to be added to that retirement package. That future wage increase from those 3 years is gone forever. For me, for any employee who follows after me, it's gone. It was gone, it was given up in order to fund that FAC3 E2 rider. Unfortunately, this commission is dealing with the fallout of some short-sighted decisions that have been made previously. Closing the defined benefit system resulted in an accelerated need for funding. The early retirements offered in 2000 and 2005 resulted in the same requirement. And the county's contribution could have increased all of those times. When the defined benefit package was closed, you created a closed system, it required accelerated funding. The funding should have been addressed to that accelerated level. I don't think it was. In Antrim County, one of the ways that they've addressed the defined benefit plan is one of the ways that's suggested by Ms. Lanoy, and that is to create a hybrid package. So their employees have a combined defined benefit, defined contribution package. And what happens when you have an ongoing defined benefit package is your system opens up and the need for accelerated funding no longer exists. Antrim County, as you know, has a much different tax base than Grand Traverse County. So the fact that they continue to offer defined benefit, defined contribution package hybrid is of note. Another option that Ms. Lanoy suggests that's already, it sounds like, been pretty much written off is the opportunity to fund the debt through municipal securities being issued. Typically, the people who buy municipal securities are among the most wealthy. in our society. So there's a concern if you're not interested in issuing the municipal securities because you're afraid that you're not going to be able to make whole at the other end of that other end of that investment. Are you more concerned with whether or not you're going to be able to make whole with the wealthy investor, or are you more concerned about whether or not you're going to be able to honor contracts that were already signed with your low and middle income employees? So if you choose to place the obligation on the backs of your employees who have already paid for this benefit, then the question is a question of integrity with respect to future contracts and with respect to historical contracts and historical promises that were made. And you will end up losing more valuable, loyal, and knowledgeable county employees if you do so.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to make a public comment? Mr. Richardson.
Ross Richardson, 10675 Candleton in Traverse City. I'm also a Traverse City Commissioner. I'm not here to talk about the pensions. I'm here to talk about the road millage, which you all acted on last week. The two county commissioners who represent the city, Dr. Lathrop and Ms. Maxpower, both voted against putting this on the ballot. Christine, you made the comment that you didn't see that you got any benefit at all out of it, and so you didn't see any reason why you should put it back on the ballot again. And I would just like to say that I think you displayed a real lack of understanding of what the city has been doing about its infrastructure issues and the progress that's been made going back over 10 years. 10 years ago, the city had only 21% of its roads rated as good or better. At this point in time, or rather last year, which is the last time we have any statistics, it was 59%. And that's because we have increased the spending for our roads and streets and sidewalks remarkably in those 10 years. 10 years ago, we were spending $100,000 a year out of the general fund. The latest figures for the year one right now is close to $2 million per year. And by the way, the road millage itself, which was voted on by the voters countywide in November 2013, only was even approved because of city voters. The countywide margin was just barely over 100 votes. The margin in the city alone was plus 700 votes. So the action by the city voters made those funds available to the entire county. I know you praised the County Road Commission for what they'd done with the money, and I would just like to say I don't understand why you didn't also praise or at least check with the city to see what they had done with the money. By the way, that $2 million that we're spending a year now is obviously due in part to the $750,000 we get from the road millage. But I did get a partial list of what we've done. We've done resurfacing on, this is just from the road millage itself now, the $750,000 a year. We've done Huron Street, LOS, Timber Lane, Arrowhead, Nakoma, Quail Ridge, both North and South Quail Ridge Courts, Cherry Lane, Alcona Court, Carver Street, Parsons, 17th Street, High Street, and the very south end of Cass Road. Actually, we haven't even spent all the money we have so far, and of course we have one more payment to go, which will be at the end of this year. Mostly, I would say to you, it's up to the voters. The voters can decide if they've gotten good service for the money, good value for the money. I can't imagine why you wouldn't let the voters make a decision on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Colburn.
Good evening. It's an honor to be here. Madam Chairman and Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have passed out a graphic for you, and this is in regard to the PASER. The PASER is a rating system in which our folks from the Public Works utilize statewide. It's put out through MDOT so that we utilize a formula that's consistent statewide. And this has been a very positive aspect in regard to funding. As you know, the statewide cities lost a good chunk of their funding through state shared revenues from shortly after 2000 through about 2013, when they finally have started reversing a little bit of the state shared revenues. But the city of Traverse City alone has lost over $4 million of revenue over that time period from the state due to the changing of their commitments towards the local governments, and much of this money could go to road funding. I had coincidentally recently spoken with Mr. Cook. The timing just came out a little sooner than I was planned on recommending to the City Commission, to recommend to the County Commission to pursue the next 4 years on a millage for the streets. We're making headway. This demonstrates that from 2006 we had 51% of our streets were fair or better, 21 of them good or better. And then from 2015, we've gone from 84% fair and better to better than 59% good and better. And the fact of the matter is we're playing catch up on the revenue sources, and so we do see this as a vital component of the funding source, and so that you know that I am planning on making that recommendation to the City Commission. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Radu?
My name is Christopher Radu. My address is 1328 Londelin Terrace North, Traverse City, Michigan. Nearly 3 years ago, I came before this board to speak against pension obligation bonds. Many people spoke against me. Ironically, Mr. Richardson was one of them, and said that what I said was smoke and mirrors, didn't know what I was talking about, and the bonds would just simply be a refinanced mortgage on a house. And sadly, most people in the crowd were more concerned about a pool closing. But here we are again. According to the Record Eagle, Miss Mary is going to give some recommendations for you, a statement about pension obligation bonds. Paraphrased, she said issuing the bonds would simply be trading one debt for another, and however, if the stock market takes a turn for the worst and investment targets are not met, the county will once again be paying for unfunded liabilities, so not a refinance of a mortgage. I told you both of these things 3 years ago. Today I'll submit this as well. Your pension plan target is 8%, which MERS has not hit on a rolling 10 or 15-year term. In fact, over 39 years, MERS has only achieved 9.5% on average. So if you issue pension obligation bonds, which don't get tax-exempt status, Mr. Hoag talked about this, that wealthy people buy pension obligation bonds. The reason why they do is because general obligation muni bonds and revenue bonds get tax-exempt status. So they don't have to pay their income tax rate on it. And if they buy state-based ones, they pay even less. Pension obligation bonds don't have that, so you have to pay a higher rate of interest. You being the county, us being the taxpayers, and then the person that buys them gets a higher rate, but they don't get the tax exemption. Those don't sell as well, so it's not really a good solution. You'll pay on average 4% for those over a 10-year period, which means to break even, you'll have to get a 12% return instead of the 8% return that you need right now, according to your discount rate assumptions on your plan. MERS has never achieved a 12% return over any sustainable period of time. So you are guaranteed to lose money on this for the county. That's like digging a hole to China and hoping you end up in Chicago. And speaking of Chicago, if you want two prime examples of where pension obligation bonds haven't and won't work, it's Chicago and the newly coined Philadelphia, because they don't even have enough money to clean their streets. I'll offer a suggestion that she didn't offer in the paper, and I suggested it 3 years ago as well. You should look into privatizing the pension obligation like GM did with its pension. I have clients that are former GM workers. They get all that they were promised in their pension, now from Prudential as opposed to the county, or GM, because that's who they sold the liability off to. And obviously those people are happy. I'm sure he'd be thrilled to know he's going to get all of his pension if you give it to somebody else. Grand Traverse County, you've got a problem. Here's MERS's returns over time. You'll see they don't, on a rolling average, they don't get the returns. 3 years ago, you had a problem. 3 years from now, it's going to be even worse. Here's your tax equalized value. It's gone up over the last 3 years, but yet the hole in the pension keeps getting worse. So even with $500,000 condos being built downtown, and people like me that move and cause my property to be revalued by 20% because the former homeowner was from 1978, you're still not getting enough revenue to cover this hole. So, you know, I'll again say, I came here 3 years ago. I offered my assistance then. I'll offer it again. I do it for free. You don't have to pay me $80 an hour or anything else. I'm happy to talk to any of you. You have board members that have my contact information, or you can write me at my aforementioned address. But please make the right decision. As a homeowner, a rental property owner, and a soon-to-be father, this decision goes well beyond any of your tenures on this board. So please take the time to make the right decision.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Would anyone else like to make public comment? Please.
Hi, my name is Bill Heike. I live at 3196 College Terrace, Thornton, Garfield Township. I'm a retired county worker. And all I want to say is that back in the 80s, I was the representative for the union when we negotiated the health and welfare part of the contract rather than money. And it was part of the contract written up, accepted by the union and the non-union employees. And since that time, they have managed to throw the non-union employees under the bus, 60 of them. They don't pay their stuff anymore. This last deal on hospitalization, they said, this is it or nothing. And it was the cheapest and lousiest plan I ever seen. I couldn't afford to live with it. So we tried to go and buy insurance somewhere else. Couldn't do it until I signed off on the county paper that said I would no longer be insured by the county. And I said, I can't sign that because that was part of our union deal. And they said, either you sign it, and I found I couldn't buy insurance until I signed that thing. So in duress, I came back, I signed it. So now I'm no longer can be insured by the county, or they don't have to insure me. And this was all part of a wage package. And I don't know why they can take this stuff away from us, and I think they're going to work on it again. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Kropa, you wish to make public comment?
I do. I have a letter here from one of my constituents that was unable to come, so he emailed me and asked me if I could read his letter in public comment.
Certainly.
This letter is from a gentleman in my district that is employed in the finance industry here in town. And his email reads, I am Jeff Strite, and I live at 4532 Westbrook Drive. Being unfunded is a reality that will not simply go away with ignoring the problem. Pointing fingers at this point as to who is responsible is pointless. At this point, there are two options. One, continue to make gradual changes that do not fundamentally address the cause, or two, address the cause of this problem. To address the cause, the recipients of these benefits need to realize that although promises were made, those promises were made on the foundation of fantasy. It is time for the public sector to move into the present and acknowledge the unsustainable premise of a pension plan. The county does not have the option of selling more widgets or increasing its prices to pay for non-service related items. There is a solution that can be borne by both county government and its employees, but it is to ask the taxpayer to foot the bill and is the most irresponsible route of all. This means any increase to taxes with no increase in value is unacceptable. Bonding this liability has also been mentioned. Bonding is not a responsible solution if the defined benefit plan continues into the future, as the bonding would only solve today's problem. It would do nothing to prevent this from happening again. The county needs to make some tough choices to the recipients of the benefits, and they also need to face some tough realities. A hard freeze on the plan affecting only current employees is not an ideal situation, but likely the most responsible one. Thank you also for your service. Jeff Strite.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to make public comment? Going once? Going twice? All righty. Next on the agenda, report on unfunded pension and retiree health care liabilities prepared by Mary Lenoy. If you would like me
Madam
to-
Chair, I'd just like to introduce Mary. As you know, we were looking to assess this situation in depth, and I was looking for someone who had immense credibility, and everyone said Mary Lenoy. She was State Controller for two administrations, the Engler and Granholm administration, and also was in finance for Ingham County, so she knows the county world as well. I was very appreciative when she said she would help us out and come up and review this, and so I hope that out of this, everyone here will have a good understanding of the situation we're in and have some recommendations, and there may be some recommendations from the board itself that might come up tonight. So this is really an educational process to allow us to determine some move-on steps. So it gives me great pleasure, and public thank you to Mary for all her work and effort on this. So Mary, you have the floor. Oh, by the way, she said we'd be very happy to entertain questions as she goes through the presentation, so if you have any questions as she's going through the various slides, please feel free to ask them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here tonight. As Tom said, as I go through, please interrupt me. It's very technical, and especially the larger report was very technically written. Unfortunately, this is a complex issue, which I've had to study over all my years and all my different jobs. I want to do four things tonight. I want to give you a quick background in the overall county finances so you can kind of put this whole pension liability in perspective in terms of the county's finances. And then I'm going to talk quite a bit about your defined benefit pension plan, which is, you know, where your unfunded liabilities are. And then also talk about what's often called other post-employment benefits, which is just really a fancy term. The acronym is OPEB, for retiree health insurance in your case. And then a discussion of options of what you could look at to address the unfunded liabilities and your increase in annual budget costs. Let's see if I get this right. Your overall budget is about $155.6 million. That includes everything. I mean, that would include your health fund and all your other governmental funds. It would include what you would maybe refer to as your component units, like your road commission and
The pavilions.
all those kinds of things.
Yes.
Your general fund budget, which is usually what I like to call a municipality or state government's main checkbook. It's the portion of your budget that isn't specifically earmarked for anything else. You know, like you might have a parks budget and a health department and all those other kinds of services that you provide. And that's $37.8 million. Now think about that in terms of this next slide, which shows, if you go right down there, just go right to the big red number, your unfunded liabilities for retiree health and the defined benefit pension program are about $58.9 million as of the end of this fiscal year. Just as a little background, the county joined MERS in 1967. That's when they established this defined benefit program. A defined benefit pension plan is based upon a multiplier, years of service, and final average compensation. Is everybody familiar with those terms, what they mean and everything? Okay. And you also know that the county has provided retiree health care. Your defined benefit plan is about 48% funded. The average rate for a MERS municipality is 76% funded, so it's quite a bit higher. There are 66 other counties in MERS, and Grand Traverse is by far the lowest funded at 48%. And I think there's a handout that
I did a spreadsheet, Mary, and it should be on the computer.
Okay, when I get to the end, okay.
I'm going to talk a little bit
Okay,
about
all right.
that after you.
Okay. In addition to this unfunded liability, the county is facing some some structural budget shortfalls. Last year, I think it was in November, the county asked Riemann Robson to prepare an independent financial analysis, and they came up with some projected shortfalls for the next few years. And this slide here shows what they are. You can see they range from $4.1 million to a little over $5 million. Now, just to be clear, these aren't cumulative, so like, or maybe I misspoke that. The 4.1, if you solve that whole thing in 2017 with structural budget, reductions, then the 4.6 goes down by that amount of money. Does everybody get, okay, all right. How does these two in terms of those numbers you just saw about the 4.1 to the $5 million shortfall that you're going to have to fix over the next few years, the defined benefit pension costs and what you're going to have to pay to MERS are going to increase by these amounts, $440,000, $410,000, $400,000, $430,000. And your OPEB, I mean, you're about $400,000 short on your OPEB contribution, and you could phase it in like this, $100,000 a year till you get to what you should be contributing every year. When you made the decision to switch, when the decision was made to close the defined benefit to new hires in 2000 for most of the county employees, my point here on this slide was your defined contribution costs are actually, they're rising with inflation because the increases are based on the increase in the salary. So, if you contribute 3% or 4% to the defined contribution program, it's based on a salary. So those cost increases are a lot smaller than the defined benefit program. And we'll get into why that is, but I just thought you might want to see the defined benefit cost will go from 4.8 to 6.5 million over this 2016 to 2020 period. That's a 35% increase, or 1.6 million. These costs cover the retirees, actives that are still in the DB plan, and the vested employees from the DB plan. And then your other 300 plus active employees are covered by the defined contribution. A little bit of history here of Grand Traverse County in terms of the MERS system. As I said earlier, you joined in 1967. Your benefit multipliers range from 2.25 to 2.8%. You have 14 divisions. In 2000, 12 of those divisions were closed to new hires. And this is a typo here. In 2015, 2 divisions were closed to new hires. So all of them right now, as we stand right now, are closed. Your unfunded accrued liability was in 2000. Let's just put this in perspective. When the decision was made to close to new hires and put the new hires in a defined contribution program, your unfunded liability was $20.6 million, and your funded status was 63%. So quite a bit better than you are today. This is sort of a slide on how did we get here to be in a situation where you have a $51 million pension liability and only 48% funded. Some of the speakers before me did a pretty good job of explaining this. But when you close the divisions to new hires, MERS makes you, way back when in 2000, your unfunded liability was paid off over a 30-year period. When you close the divisions to new hires, MERS starts giving you, they go down 2 years at a time. So the first year, you have to fund your unfunded liability. They figure out your cost over 28 years, and then 26, and then 24. So if you had followed that, if the county had followed that and there hadn't been any other changes, which there are some more here, that liability would be gone today. Because you're at 15 years, you would have pretty much gone down, or you'd have a very small amount. But you also had some 2000 and 2005 early out incentives that were offered, and so that increased your liability, your unfunded liability. MERS did not hit their investment targets, especially between 2000 and 2004. And then between 2009, here's another, and 2011, there was a 3-year freeze on your declining amortization rates. So MERS gave you a freeze, a break, but it just pushed it down. In 2008, as you all know, obviously I think MERS lost 25% of their investment, on their investments. So the fortunate thing is that MERS does, in terms of their increases and their decreases in a given year, they smooth those out over 10 years. So you didn't get the hit all at once. And of course, last year the county ended the last 2 open DB close those DB plans for the circuit court employees. This slide is just to show you the exact dollar amounts of the contributions that the county is going to have to pay. You can see from 2004 to 2016, it was a 50% increase. It increased from 3.2 million to about 4.8 million. I wanted to take a second and talk about this, but you can see here that once you get the unfunded liability paid off, you will no longer have to pay this 4.2 million, or as it'll increase to, you know, a couple $100,000 more next year and the year after that. But once you can get that paid off, then that goes away. You don't have to pay that anymore. And all you'll be paying is the normal cost, which is just the cost of benefits that are earned by employees in the current year, which is obviously a much smaller number. Just so you have some sense of how MERS calculates these. One of the assignments I was given when I put this report together was, how does Grand Traverse compare to other municipalities? We've already talked a little bit about it, but let's talk about some other issues here. The average employee contribution to the MERS DB pension plan is about 5.5% to 6.5% in the other communities. I just retired from Ingham County, and I can tell you our employee contributions range from, I think we had one unit at 2 or 3%, but most of the units were between 8 and 12 or 13%. We had some deputies getting up close to 19 and 20%. In 2014, only 9 of Grand Traverse's active 88 MERS participants contributed to any amount. And even those amounts were 0.67% in one unit and 2% in one of the deputies' units. We went through this before. The average funded status of all DB plans administered by MERS is 78%, all the counties is 76%. Absent changes in the county's defined benefit plan, it's going to require an increase of funding of about 4.8 million or between 2016 to 2026. In 2026, your employee contribution will be 8.8 million. So, and then, because that's sort of the tipping point, if you continue along the path that MERS has put you on, in 2027, that'll fall to about $1 million. Because by that point, you would getting close to fully funding it. But that's another 10 years. Think about that. You made this change in the defined contribution, the switch to defined contribution in 2000 and 2026 before you get relief.
Mary, you're focusing on the defined benefit pension.
Yes.
And you are not talking a great deal about OPEBs. I think it's extremely important for the public and for everyone to know that we cannot legally bond for those OPEB plans. The reason we cannot legally bond is we have 7 open plans. Those plans by state law, so when people suggest, if you read in the ticker, whatever, oh, you know, the board needs to bond, the board needs to bond, we cannot bond those plans. They are open plans. They have to be closed in order to legally bond those. And that requires union negotiation. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, and I'm going to talk about OPEB in a few minutes. What are some options? The county commissioned a study that MERS completed last year, and they asked them to look at a bridge benefit plan with a 1.0 multiplier going forward. So that would mean whenever it takes effect, an employee's retirement compensation would be based on, let's say, the 2.5 multiplier going back, and it would be based on a 1.0 multiplier going forward. If you freeze the final average compensation, that was one of the scenarios that MERS ran, it would save $750,000 the first year. If you if your final average compensation is based on termination for all the years of service, you'd save $450,000 the first year. So, and you don't, the 1.0 multiplier, I mean, it could be, a different amount. I think MERS allows you to go up by 0.25%. You could increase another option would be to increase the employee contribution. Just to give you a sense, each 1% increase in the employee's contribution would save about $45,000 a year, assuming that the county offsets with a reduction in the employer contribution. Could also increase the employer contribution. It's currently estimated that for your 2017 budget year, it would be about $5.24 million. You could raise it $100,000, $500,000, $1 million, or any amount each year. But of course, with your current, earlier we saw what your budget situation is, so that just means it would make your budget shortfalls worse. There are hybrid pension plans which offer and that was mentioned earlier in the public comment, they offer a combination of defined benefit and defined contribution options. For example, you could offer a DB multiplier of 1.0 and an employer contribution of 2% to a DC plan. I will say, we actually did this in Ingham County when I was controller there a few years ago. We closed to new hires and put the new hires in a hybrid pension plan. And a lot of municipalities look at this as a good option. One, it's kind of something in between going, just, new hires are in a defined contribution program. But it also gets you out of that whole, having to pay off your pensions over a shorter period of time.
Basically, I think what that does is increase your amortization schedule out 24 years compared to the 13 we're on now. And
You could.
You're not
I'm
lessening
not sure that's,
Well, you're not lessening your debt, you're just extending it out longer.
What it does is you could open it would be considered by MERS an open plan.
Right.
But you could also just offer it, I suppose you could offer it to just those in the, or you could make it effective for new hires just in the, I don't know, it seems like you'd be going backwards because you wanted, years ago the decision was made to try to get away from DB and switch over to defined contribution.
I concur with that. When everybody is trying to get out of the defined benefits, it doesn't make a lot of sense to go back into them, and we worked hard to get out of them even though it's created problems.
MERS came through about 5 or 6 years ago and made a big push for the hybrid plans, and they were here at least a couple times, and it was our discussion at the time that that was a big step backwards for us. We made tough decisions in 2000 and acted in 2001 to eliminate the defined benefit program, seeing at that point that the legacy costs were going to be astronomical that we couldn't handle. One of the problems that we had is the way to make the jump to the defined contribution was the early outs, and that was the biggest way we were able to cut that number off, not necessarily being explained really well about the accelerated amortization and all of those kind of decisions that, came down to us along the way. But, we looked at the hybrids long and hard, and it just didn't make any sense, at least in my mind. It made no sense for us. We had made the decision to get out of defined benefits. One of the problems that we had is we had a number of county employees for an extended length of time after 2000 that stayed and were still on defined benefit plans, and that was just making that pot of money continue to rise.
You're right. And that sort of, I was asking myself the question about, did MERS really explain
it, yeah.
the accelerated amortization schedule?
The answer is no.
Yeah, and so I kind of just surmised that.
I didn't
That
say,
was-
that was my answer. I said I doubt that people really understood it in terms of what the options were.
And the actuarials that continuously repeated, showed 8% return, we kept asking about that, but they said, oh, now our 10-year average gets there, but none of the numbers that I ever seen actually, in fact, showed 10%.
They don't make that.
No, and then in 2008, 2009, when they dumped 25% like everybody else across the country, each and all of us, had the same problem with our personal ones. And, it'll take more than 10 years to even out 25% losses.
I think that we have a much bigger problem, though. 66 counties in MERS. They had the same rate of return as we had. They had the same lack of explanation for closing benefit programs. They had the same unusual expectations and roller coaster ride of the market, yet we fall dead last. There's no way that Grand Traverse County didn't make substantial errors in this. It's just not possible. It's not possible for the average funding to be 76% and we're at 48% with the exact same system and the exact same program. I mean, we need to target in on what we did wrong in order to make sure that we correct it and not do it again.
Was the early outs.
The early outs were a critical error, but there's no way it made us the least funded pension in the entire state system.
Well, just among counties.
Among 66 of 83 counties in Michigan. That's pretty bad. I mean, that's not a top 10 list we want to be on.
As you know, I did spreadsheets, and I will be showing these spreadsheets to the public via the computer because I think it's important that they see this. Our problem started in 1988. The architect of this mess was Mr. Rothschild.
I am aware of that.
We were, at that point, let's see, 1987, we were 142% funded. And we dropped 20% in a matter of 2 years. And there are some other numbers that are going to jump out when I show it up on the screen. And yes, we are dead last out of 66 counties, and I have that list too, and we have been dead last since 2009. Other counties have been pulling away from us. And I will show you a few things that some of the other counties have done, some good, some bad, when we get to that point.
I'd like to mention, you know, when I look back, in my day when I went to pre-med medical school, we used slide rules. We weren't allowed to use calculators. Got an E. That was cheating. We had people back then, when this all happened, that had the financial acumen and a slide rule on a calculator. They didn't need advice from MERS. They could know, project ahead of time. It's not rocket science. It's a real disappointment that we're here now. I don't think there's an excuse for it. I mean, any of us that have a credit card or a home loan would know better than this. So I'm not buying it that, you know, we didn't get right information.
Well, we are where we are. Mary, how do we get out of this mess? Other than Mr. Peacock told us when he came, there's only one way: pay more money. That's the only way I know. Your suggestions?
Well, I think I've laid out some options here. And the hybrid pension plans, or not the hybrid, the bridge, the employee contributions and the bridge benefit plan would require negotiations with your unions, of course. Paying more money would help. You could issue pension obligation bonds, but, you know, I think there's problems with that.
There's extreme risk with that. I can, well, I don't want to interrupt your presentation,
okay.
but
Okay.
when you're ready,
Okay.
let me know. I'm going to come up there and show mine.
Okay. In terms of pension obligation bonds, which are referred to as municipal securities in the state legislation that authorize local units of government, they could be able to do it. There's a number of qualifications you have to have, like, for instance, on the pensions, you have to have your DB, all of your DB plans have to be closed, and you have to have a AA credit rating or better. It requires the approval of the Department of Treasury. In terms of your case, if you borrowed pension, if you did go out for municipal securities, your proceeds would then be forwarded to MERS. And theoretically, what it would do, let's say you borrowed the whole 50-some million. You'd borrow it, give it to MERS, they'd put it in, your unfunded liability would go away, and that, 4 million piece would go away. But you'd have to earn enough. MERS would have to keep earning enough so that you don't end up getting another unfunded liability.
And that is exactly what's happening to some of the counties that have bonded. They were at 100% and they're going down.
And as it was said earlier, one of my comments in the report was, you're just trading one debt for another. You're not getting rid of $51 million in debt. You're just borrowing $51 million.
With money,
If you'd
you
have
don't have
done-
to gamble,
You're gambling more.
that you can't lose.
If you'd have done that in 2009, you would have owed $50 million, you'd have lost 25% on that, you'd have owed the additional 25% plus the $50 million, and you'd had higher payments than before. You got yourself in worse trouble.
And if you go back and you read a lot of the literature on this, on who's done it successfully and who hasn't, a couple things turn out. It seems like the wealthier the municipality or state government, the more likely they are to be okay. Part of that, I think, is because they feel like they can accept the risk if something goes bad. The other thing is, it depends on when you borrow, what the market's like. If you borrow and the market goes down 25% the next year, you're never going to get out of the water on this. It's going to cost you a lot of
Yeah.
money. If-
The
if-
study
it'll
I've
kill you.
done on this, I think it was the American Society of Actuarials. They even recommend exactly what you said. If you're flush in cash, go for it. You really don't have much to lose. But if you're in the situation we're in now, it makes no sense. We've said before, and I'll still say, that there's no way I'll ever vote for a pension obligation bond.
If you look at the appendices to the report, I've attached a few articles on the whole subject. But the credit rating agencies, and even some of those who study this, will say that if you issue these without other structural changes, you could be risking your credit.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no guarantee without those structural changes that Treasury would approve it.
Right.
OPEB. Right now, because you haven't, your funded status is at zero. You may have set aside some money, but it's not in, it's supposed to be in an irrevocable trust.
We have zero fund balance, but I put, because I know I've got to put it on my books next year, I put $250,000 in this year's budget just to start funding it to some extent.
But you
Even though
are
it's
correct.
below- it was below.
Up until Mr. Menzel's arrival, we contributed zero.
It's not unusual. Almost all units of government did the same thing. They just did the pay-as-you-go. They paid out whatever the retirees' health care costs were, they just built it into the current year budget. Now that GASB's, required everybody to
Put it on the books.
put it on the books, most units of government have started to address it.
But we should know, we were paying that annually as part of each year's budget.
Right.
We budgeted, we've reduced the number a couple times, but, I think last time was like $100,000 in 2014's budget, if I remember right, to cover OPEB healthcare benefits.
It's a 30-year amortization schedule, and so the 100, before we made those changes in December, our payment would have been $690, but those changes have brought it down each year to be in compliance a little over $500,000 now.
And this slide here kind of shows that in 2016, based on the most recent valuation report, you should be paying in $640,000 a year. And as Tom said, you budgeted $250. So you got a shortfall on an annual basis of about $400,000.
Is that legal?
There's nothing illegal about
Nothing.
it.
I'm just curious. You promise a benefit, you supply the benefit, and then you don't pay for it?
Well, that's an interesting question. I know I told my county board when I worked at Ingham County, because they hadn't to that point been funding it anywhere near what it should have been. And I said, well, you basically made a promise you can't keep because you're not funding it. I think the whole GASB these whole GASB requirements were meant to force units of government, since they haven't put it on their book and show what the liability is, and, that it would force them into having to recognize it and plan for it and build it in.
Maybe that's a difference between being illegal and immoral.
I'm a little,
It's a fine line, isn't it?
However, it was, even though it wasn't on the books, anyone that read just a few paragraphs down, it was footnoted. Both of these figures, I mean, the OPEB, the fact that it's not, it's not going to be on the books until next year.
The first
cares?
time, that this was in a CAFR in a footnote was in 2006.
Yeah.
Before that,
But-
it was no one, I didn't know about it. I
Somebody
certainly was not told by
Somebody knew.
the administrator.
it's malfeasance.
We had number crunchers
But-
here that knew it.
Anyway,
Well, and in 2000, when you close your books for 2015, you're going to have to reflect another GASB
yes,
requirement. You're going to have to reflect your pension liability.
yes,
On
GASB
your
68. And we
book,
did a
on your
pro
books,
forma with Riemann, presented it to us, so we know what we're looking at.
Okay. What are some of the options? You can close access to retiree health insurance for all new hires. You can increase the retirees and future retirees' premium share for employees represented by a collective bargaining agreement. What that really means is the changes you made last year for the employees not represented by a collective bargaining agreement, you could pursue negotiations with your unions to make that permanent. And you could phase in an annual, another option is to phase in an annual increase to the employer's ARC. Your OPEB liability is projected at the end of this year at 7.7 million. I'd suggest the first thing you do is you start increasing your budget every year. You may not feel like with the budget situation you're in, you can do it, put in another $400,000 a year, or maybe you do. Maybe you just bite the bullet and say, this is the right thing to do. And in 30 years, it'll be funded. And if you make those changes, you can get the collective bargaining agreements to reflect those changes you made last year. Excuse me, I'm losing. That will also reduce that liability.
Bonnie?
You mentioned how many people were in defined benefit. The majority of county employees do not have retiree health insurance. Most of us don't have it. So it's a huge amount. Who has it? How many people actually even have it, or I didn't even know there were current ones that could be eligible for it anymore.
Well, I think it's in, you'd have to go through each of your collective bargaining agreements.
There are
and
7
look.
open OPEB plans. Primarily, they exist in the sheriff's department. Not all, but primarily that's where they are.
Sheriff's Department and the courts.
Dean gave me a list, and I hand wrote it, and do you think I can find it anywhere? No. But I've got it somewhere.
Okay. With that, I mean, I've concluded my presentation.
All right.
Thank you for the
I'd
opportunity.
like to do mine.
Oh, let me see.
I would
I'll let somebody else figure it out. What would you like to do?
I would just mention one thing, is that Mary's mention of structural changes is critically important, because no matter how much money you put into it, if you don't make the structural changes, you don't stop the trajectory of the increase. The other thing, in terms of generating more revenue, is going through the operations and finding efficiencies to lowering your operating costs, which would then free up more money to pay for those as well. So those are things that have to be addressed as well.
Yeah, that's. Carol?
On that note, as far as going through and finding efficiencies and things, what happened to the results-based budgeting that we all kind of decided that we really wanted, and I haven't heard anything about it? And
We are so far from results-based budgeting, you wouldn't believe it.
I would, and I don't like it.
Well, you've got to
How do we get closer?
This organization is so far from being able to put measurements in. I don't even have an HR director. I haven't had one for a year. I don't have a finance director. I haven't had one for a long time. Those are 2 key positions that have to do the implementation of the results-based budgeting. And if without those positions, you can't do it. In fact, if I don't get those positions filled, I'm kind of getting stuck on what I can do. I was this afternoon dealing with HR issues. so I'm stretched so thin that I'm just dealing with critical issues, and I'm sure some are falling through the cracks because I can't get to all of them. So you've got to get an organization in place to be able to do that.
One of the...
Now, what you can do is, as we go through the audits of the departments, and we're doing that, and Mary has just agreed tonight to help us with auditing one of the key departments. I have 3 proposals coming in for the IT department, which I will pick one of those to go through. I've got to get the organizations back to a point where there's efficiency and effectiveness, and the next step is once you've got the organizational redesign in place, then you put the measurements in based on the new organizational structure. But until you have that, you're putting measurements into probably a dysfunctional organizational structure that doesn't work in the first place. So you got to clean that up first, and then that's part of the process. But I'm just being real candid with you. I know you don't want to hear that, but we're not ready for that yet. I did it with Beta. I did it about after the 3rd year. After we got all the other stuff cleaned up. And it's important to do it, but you have one chance to do it. And if you don't do it right in the first initiative, you'll probably never ever get it done again. So you need to do it right.
I think a good first step in moving administration forward in that is having Jen go to the GFOA.
Well, because when we're going through and finding efficiencies and just trying to make cuts everywhere, what you have is, a room full of people saying, don't cut this program, don't cut my program, don't cut my program.
Yeah.
And then the natural next question that we ask is, tell us what to cut. It's backwards. What I learned last time that I went to learn about this was,
tell us what you
ask
want to
the
keep.
taxpayers what they want us to spend the money on. Instead of saying, well, tell us what to cut, or because they're going to sit out there and tell us what not to cut, obviously. But what happened to asking the taxpayers, ranking the things, what is important to you, and we rank those things, what we have to provide, what people want us to provide, add in what we owe for all this every year, and draw the line, and everything that falls below the line, you maybe work it out a little bit, but the things that fall below the line are things that we just can't do and have been determined weren't all that important. They're important to somebody, of course, but in the grand scheme of things, what I had come on board wanting to do is ask the taxpayers, what do you want us to spend your money on? It's not our money, it's your money. So I think that somehow we have to get back to that, asking the taxpayers, and then put the measurements in, and then make sure that we're funding things according to how they want, make sure that things are efficient.
We did
But I
ask-
think that we need to ask, what is it that you want us to fund? What is it that you want this county government to do for you, and at what level?
Well, we did ask the Easing Pool people, and they said they didn't want the pool cut. They didn't care if I cut the animals, but the animals didn't care if I cut the Easing Pool.
But that's
So you're
why
all over the
we don't
board.
wanna- we don't
Every
wanna get-
special interest shows up.
Exactly, and that's what you can hopefully minimize that by asking, and the 90,000 people out there, what do you want us to spend the money on?
That's called zero-based budgeting.
Exactly.
And you
What
can't
do you
do
want?
zero-based budgeting when you don't have a baseline.
Well, I know.
If the citizens step forward and say, you know what, we love the sheriff's department, that's it, public safety is number one to us, we can't tell them how much we're spending on it.
That's a
the
problem, too.
We're talking about the measurements, because it is important to rank what it is, but in order to make sure that we can satisfy those requests and fit those all into whatever's left when we subtract out all of our debt payments, we have to know what it is. Maybe there's 5 things that are important, but if we don't make things efficient, we'll only have room for 3.
It's true.
The sheriff's department is going to be audited, and they are going to look for efficiencies in the sheriff's department. You know why? Because I'm certain public safety is number one.
I think so.
It is to me,
It
as
has-
a citizen
no.
and as a
That's where it
commissioner.
shows up in most counties
on
where they've
mine,
asked.
But I
That's what
want to
shows
see
up.
Mine,
the
I have
sheriff's
an older
department
version,
budget
and I know
streamlined so that we can fit in other things that are
150%,
important to
but-
people.
It's all right.
Zero-based budgeting doesn't work. Congress tried to do zero-based budgeting.
I can see it.
FYI, they're further off from it than we are. But
I'm
it's
good.
not possible
It'll be
without a
fine.
baseline. And
Well,
Tom is correct, we have to build the baseline first by knowing what things cost. And unfortunately, this county didn't put a priority in knowing how much things cost
No,
for the last
we
20,
didn't.
30 years.
Well,
We
the
didn't.
first thing is you identify, and
Little-
we have, what our mandated requirements are.
200.
But that doesn't mean that they're being implemented efficiently and
Hang on.
effectively.
Not
We may have
necessarily.
those, and we can do those better, per Commissioner Crawford's point. But once you've got that to a point where you feel you are as efficient as you can be, and that also includes putting measurements in for that, then you've got this lower tier, and that's where I think you would get the public involvement in terms of what I want. What you will get, though, is every group that has a special interest saying they want theirs. I think the public probably will be pretty much in alignment with what the state mandated services are, sheriff, courts, things like that, that we have, health and safety, things of that nature. But we have a lot of things, I think, that people don't realize the county does. Also, there probably could be, though I know townships don't like to hear this, probably more collaboration and fund sharing in terms of some of the services that we provide, you know. And those are discussions which are never comfortable, but passing along some of those or sharing those in a collaborative fashion probably would take some of the pressure off the budget as well.
Until we make efficiencies in the departments, we can't fit the maximum amount in to prioritize. It would be an unfair exercise to draw that line in a false place. So the baseline is the critical.
My feeling is, since we've never done any really in-depth audits, that we will find some good opportunities for efficiencies. And so we're going to be starting those. They're expensive, that's why I'm getting 3 bids on each one, especially in technology. I have bids that are going from 17 to 40,000 on the same project, so I'm trying to, do an apples-to-apples comparison, because I want, in that case, to not only look at the department, but look at the end users, our customers, the city and ourselves. And so we're negotiating how to get that structure consistent, but I'm hoping out of that, and it's not an I gotcha on any department, it's a way to help them be more efficient and be better focused on the customer needs, which are internal customers, and in doing so, I'm hoping we could cut some costs in the process, so.
I agree, we do have to know what things cost.
Yeah,
I find that really,
And
disturbing that we do not know.
Hence the GFOA conference
I know.
on Saturday,
that we do need to
the
know.
Saturday session.
We do need to know what things cost. We do, absolutely. And
We
it's distressing
provide-
that we don't.
We, the county, provide hundreds of different services in this community. We have very little information as to what each of those services cost. But what we do hear regularly is that there are people in our community that depend on those services.
Right.
So, as we talk about cutting services and cutting things that we're not going to do anymore, someone in our community is going to be, totally decimated by the fact that, this service went away, One of the things that we always get into the discussion when we talk about mandated services compared to chosen services, there's a lot of these services that are mandated, but there's no designation as to at what level you have to mandate that or provide that service. And I think that's where we probably have the greatest amount of flexibility for us, but it requires that audit. It requires the audit, and we've been through the budget process several times since I've been here, and we always talk to all of the departments at the same thing. What service do you provide? How much does that service cost, and how many people are served by it? But we never get that information. Never.
Well, actually,
I find that
we get
incredible.
information, it's just generally inaccurate. And we have discovered that with pool memberships. I said for years, there's no way there's over 200 members in that pool. I have names, I have the documents, and sure enough, we're at 141, and we're holding around 141. It just wasn't there. I was correct, even though it was built up that, oh no, we have this many members. They were counting people 3 and 4 times. And anyway, I digress. I want to call your attention to 2 spreadsheets I did. This is a spreadsheet that lists every county, and the ranking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the left is how the ranking was in 2012. It is not how it is today. But I want to call your attention to Branch County. You will note that Branch County was almost 100% funded, and then suddenly dropped to 60%. Why, you may ask? I asked. I looked it up. In 2012, the county switched pension plans when John Hancock required 100% funding from the county. The county only had to meet a 50% funding with MERS to transfer plans last summer. MERS agreed to let the county amortize the delinquency over 23 years. The payments this year, which only include the county match to employee contributions, will take the county to around the 72% funding level. As a result of moving to MERS, basically what they're doing is borrowing from their pension fund. They're not paying what they owe. That's one county that did it that way. Now, here we are at the bottom, and we have been at the bottom now for 6 years. Other counties have recognized with GASB 68 the need to pay more money, and they have been doing exactly that. Grand Traverse County has not been doing that. Now, I'm going to take you up to, where are you? Ottawa. There we are. Ottawa County, which was pretty well funded. They were around 80% funded. They did do pension obligation bonds. And, oh, look where they are now, 90. So it is gambling. It is risky gambling. Now, where's my other spreadsheet? Is it sheet 2? Get this? Yes. No, I want this one. Okay. This, ladies and gentlemen, is how we got here. Oops. The problem started, I'm going to go to the top of the page. I have a different version of Excel, so y'all are just going to have to be patient with me here. I will start, and as you can see, in 1987, we were 142% funded. We went down 20% in 1989 to 123. There's another 20% drop between 1992 and 1993. And the annual liability, I computed that as well. And it will take you, we have been doing this, folks, for 30 years. It will take you to the magic, at the end of 2014, $813,929. I think it's important, I wanted to provide this spreadsheet to you because I think it's important to take a look at where the abnormalities are in the spreadsheet. I think it's extremely important that we look to find what occurred during those years so as not to repeat it. And I think there are lessons in here that we can use to get our way out of it. But the long story short, I agree with Dr. Johnson. There is absolutely no way that I will risk, and it's gambling, taxpayer money on pension obligation bonds. We have got to, in my opinion, we have got to fix the structural problems in the county. Other counties are just kicking the can down the road, and they're not making the structural changes they need to make. If we want to get out of this, and we can get out of it, these changes have to be structural. And people are going to have to learn, and it isn't going to be pleasant, people are going to have to learn that perhaps the level of service that they have been used to is no longer going to be the level of service they receive. So there's my 2 cents.
I have some questions about some of the turning points as far as making sure we don't end up in the same place again. And I think that one of the key points in the history regarding this was the early buyout program.
The early buyout and the freezing, the 3-year freeze hurt us very, very badly.
Yeah. The early buyout happened in 2005, and you can't help but notice a significant change on the spreadsheet as well. I guess I have a hard time understanding a lot of this because, maybe because I come from the business world. I understand that GASB did not require the books to show unfunded liabilities like pensions and retiree health care. I get that. But just because the law doesn't tell you that you have to put it on the books, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't put it on the books. So
I agree.
While for decades, Grand Traverse County, especially Mr. Hoag, what you said, interesting to me, not having been at the county at that time, the county's administrator went into labor contract negotiations and made promises in lieu of raises for benefits that he never funded. How is this legal? Just because GASB doesn't require you to put a pension debt on the books or an OPEB debt, does that mean that it doesn't exist? Because I'll just erase my mortgage and pretend it doesn't exist, you know? For decades, we had an administration that told its employees, made them promises, told the citizens. It's like saying, well, here's my checking account, I've got 10 grand in it, I'm rich. But you don't tell them you have $100,000 in credit card debt because the law didn't require you to tell them. Somebody committed some sort of malfeasance in the history of Grand Traverse County. I'm sorry, it just is what it is. So now we are all in a terrible position. People are angry. I'd be angry too. I am angry. These are my tax dollars. They're every one of ours sitting in this room. 2 years ago, I found out about this and ran for office to change it. There's only one person we have to thank, and that's you. You were my county commissioner at the time. Of course, I didn't want to run against you. But she isn't now, clearly. There was one person on this board for 10 years telling everybody that this was going on, even though it legally wasn't obligated to talk about it.
I didn't do it all 10 years. I will tell you how it started. My husband was a member of COFAC, and I see former City Commissioner Mike Gilman in the audience, who was also at that time a member of COFAC. And Mike Gilman was telling the City Finance Committee of the danger of unfunded pensions and the danger of OPEBs. And my husband came home after a meeting and he said, how's the county? I said, well, I asked. I said, the county, Dennis Aloya told me we were defined contribution, which he did. I did not learn until a short time later that we were, not defined contribution. We still had defined benefit pensions out there. And that's when I started looking, and I brought the CAFRs home, and my husband and I pored over them, and Beth Friend, God love Beth, we did a presentation to the then county board and showed everyone that expenses were going up and revenues were flat, and we had to fix it. And that's when I first brought results-based budgeting to the county board and suggested that we do this. I had the support of Dennis Aloya. I had the support of Dean Bott. However, I did not have the support of the county board. I recall Larry Fleece and Dick Thomas and Herb Lemkool saying, we can do this ourselves. And we could not and did not do this ourselves. The hole kept getting deeper, and that is why, and I so appreciate Tom's being on board, recognizing that the seriousness of this problem, willing to tackle this problem, because I was talking to myself for many years. As this board knows, the first meeting in January, I brought MERS in here. Now, I do believe that there are a number of things that we can do to fix this. Obviously, union negotiations are going to play a significant part in it. The other thing is structural change in the county, and that I know Mr. Menzel and Jen DeHaan are both working on some structural changes. It's going to take time.
It's just difficult for me
But-
to understand
But
how somebody did this.
there is absolutely no question the architect of this mess is Ross Childs.
Well,
The numbers are what they are.
There's only been one person trying to stop us from speaking about this for the last year and a half, and it's the same name that you just mentioned. We're not here to go after a certain person, but we're here to establish that it is okay to be angry about this. It's okay for the taxpayers to be angry that their dollars weren't spent right. It's okay for previous commissioners to be angry that they weren't informed appropriately by their administrator. And it is absolutely okay for former employees and current employees to be angry about promises made based on nothing. I won't pull out my rainbows and unicorns thing that I use about the dams, but it's applicable in this situation. I mean, I've been reading over this and thinking about it, and there's only one way to solve this. We all have to work together. We cannot have unions fighting against unions and past employees fighting against previous employees and current employees, and we can't do it. I mean, none of us like this. We all hate we're here, and it's not okay to direct this anger at different people. We just all need to work together and solve it. So I will tell you what I came up with, and I'm hoping that this board will support me. We're going to have to ask each and every citizen to make concessions in the level of services that they receive. We're going to have to ask past and current employees to make concessions and promises that were made to them. None of us want to. So what I would like to do is something that we do in the private sector, which is called leading by example. I am going to ask, and I have asked our county prosecutor, who is not able to be here today, Chris Forsyth, to draw up a resolution that I am putting on Ways and Means. I've contacted our chair next week, and I am going to ask the County Board of Commissioners to eliminate all salary and per diem payments for the next 2 years. We will serve for nothing on the county board until we solve this problem. Everybody will have time to think about it. It won't go on resolution until next week. And of course, that's a committee, so therefore you have time until the end of the month. But I am determined that if I am going to continue to serve as a commissioner, that I am not going to take a dollar of this county's money. When you lead from the top by example and you sacrifice, you instill a spirit of sacrifice in everybody. I am so sorry that Grand Traverse County is in this position. I really am. I'm sorry because my dollars are part of this spreadsheet. And I can't fix it by myself, but I can sacrifice as a public servant because I believe we have the right team sitting here that will do this. So
It is not on the agenda. We thank you.
So I am going to ask you to consider that.
We thank you for giving us a heads up for Ways and Means, and I'm going to move us back to the agenda item. Tom, do you have anything else that you would like to add?
Well, I would like to get some more feedback, and maybe we could start with the less controversial one, which is the healthcare issues. And there were some options that were laid out, and wondering if you'd be able to walk through those three and just give me some feedback on how you felt about any of those. And first one would be, Madam Chair, would be close access to retire health insurance for all new hires. Would that be something that would
Are you talking about?
Just talking about the op-ed now, at the easier one first,
Okay.
that starts. And what I would try to do if you said, well, we would consider that, then I would try to go back to finance and find out what the cost ramifications of that would be. You know, closing access to retire health insurance for all new hires, that would, there's always some hypothetical situations you have to put down because you don't know how many you're hiring and at the wage, but we could maybe come up with some projections at what the savings would be. For example, increasing retirees and future retirees' premium shares
Well, I do
kind of thing.
think it is, one of Mary's points was excellent. It is extremely unusual that employees contribute so little to their health, to their retirement plans.
Well, we currently...
And I understand it has to be negotiated.
Right, yeah. Well, two things on that is yes, in terms of giving people the advantage of a group rate, but, passing more of those costs along. The other issue is that we are currently at a 6% level for co-pays, and like the city's at 20, and most people are at 20, and we've been very low for a long, long time, and possibly looking at getting more in line with the marketplace, that kind of thing, and then giving you an idea of what the cost ramifications of that would be. You could track it better with current employees because you have a set number and you know what the amount would be. But those are some things that you could do in terms of actual costs. The union contracts make it a little bit difficult because they're not coming up all at the same time. In fact, I've got contracts that have wage increases at a time when I really can't afford to give them, but under the contracts, I'm supposed to give wage increases,
Can we
so-
reopen any of those
Well,
based on our financial situation?
Oh, I think we can reopen them, yes. Yeah, we've talked about that and talked to Peter Cole about that, and they would have to agree to reopen them, but we certainly have talked about asking that to take place based on the financial situation and seeing if they would work with us on some of these things. But that's, maybe it's maybe you need to think about it for a while and let me know on a one-on-one basis, but I was just wondering if you had any
Dr. Lathrop?
feelings on that.
Tom, what can we do as a board right now that doesn't involve union negotiation? I know we have to solve a lot of this with union negotiation, but what can we do? What about the OPEBs? Can we do that as a board right now?
I believe, I have to check with our labor attorney, but I believe that if we are consistent across the board with all the employees in the county, that we could, under some legislation which was passed, raise the co-pays up to a higher amount, but it has to be done for everyone across the board, union and non-union. The savings that we've experienced so far have been in non-union employees because of the collective bargaining agreements, and that's not fair of putting all of that on non-union, having the unions being immune from any of the changes. So that has to, from fairness, we have to go after that too. But to answer your question directly, I think the co-pays is something we could deal with right away. In terms of retiree health insurance for all new hires, certainly.
We could do that
We
right
could
away.
do that. I think next week you have something coming up in terms of buying additional credit back for the existing DB for people, having a policy that says we're not doing that anymore. Those kinds of things could be, we've had requests for buybacks for additional credit for the defined benefit.
Yes.
I've heard it's as bad as early out.
I think we need to put a
writing a
policy
policy
out
that's
that we're
going
not
to
going
take
to
care
allow
of that.
that kind of thing, because it
Can I-
increases our liability.
Can I get more information on the closing the access to retiree health insurance for all new hires? That is, you said there's 7 open plans.
There are.
So
They're
we're talking
contracted.
about those 7 groups of employees, that anyone that gets hired into one of those groups
Still
is not
gets
at
it.
the option of getting retiree health care.
Yeah.
But those groups are under a union contract.
Yes,
So that particular thing only applies if we're able to reopen contracts.
yes.
So the changes that we made, those 6 bullet point changes that we made back in November or December,
December.
did that include non-contract employees' retiree health insurance?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
no new
What we-
hires
what
that are
we did-
non-contract
What we
are
did
eligible?
is we were providing, we paid for all supplemental insurance costs for retirees.
Right.
You got Medicare, but they had a supplemental policy. We were paying for that. We eliminated that and still had a policy. The people could have the policy, but they would have to pay the premiums, but save under a group rate. We also lowered the premiums from, we would pay, we capped it $100 and above that, the individuals would pay for the additional cost above $100.
Right.
So we capped it. That saved about $2.1 million long-term. Our obligations when I got here was around close to $12 million. We've gotten it down with those just two moves down to 7.7. But the union contracts, unless they will open them, we have to wait to deal with some of those things when the contracts come up.
But there's nobody currently that isn't under a union contract that we could make this change for.
No, I think we've
already done it.
We've already done
We
it.
did that in December.
So this isn't something that we can make effective now. This
Oh, well,
is,
there's one thing that we could, I believe, and I have to check with our labor attorney, but I think you have the ability, it may take place in the next budget year, which is really what I'm going for in terms of what my cost basis is. You might be able to, if you did it across the board, raise the copay from 6 to 10 to 15 to 20. You'd have to see how that would impact people. You can imagine, even though it's probably right to do it to 20, the impact on the organization. So I think you'd have to think that through and say, would we go 10 and then would we do it to 15 or 20? Do you phase it in or do you do it all at once, depending on your financial situation? But that could be done right away.
so back to Dan's question, what can we do tonight, or what can we discuss or start researching
Well,
that isn't relying upon reopening union contracts?
We can look at the access to retire health insurance, closing the access, what we project that savings would be. We can give you an idea of increasing the premiums that people pay at maybe a 10% and a 20%, and what the financial ramifications would be in the 2017 budget. And then phase in annual increase in the employer's contribution. So, we could provide you some analytical basis on that. It's projections, of course, but that would give you probably a better basis to make a decision on, because you'd know that the projected savings would be X, But this is part of what we call the structural change, that this would be going forward. And so if you ended access health insurance for all new hires, that's law, it ends it. And over time, as people get out of the system, but then you could increase the cost for those that are currently in it to balance it off more too. Those are things you could do.
Dan?
I'd be very interested in seeing those projections about what we can do right now in 2 weeks. And I'm not asking you to do it in 2 weeks, but I'm saying, if we had the information at our fingertips,
Yeah.
what kinds of things can we do
And
right away?
they're looking at me as I've got wonderful people who are trying to close the books and also prepare for an audit.
An audit.
And I don't have a finance person.
I didn't mean the way I said it.
Yeah, we'll find a way to do it, I guess. We'll figure it out. But I wouldn't want to make a decision without that information if
Yeah.
I were you, and you need that information.
The another thing I need to understand is, we talk about open negotiations, reopen negotiations. Tell me how that happens. Is that something you can do today? Or do you have to wait for the normal time of negotiation to show up?
No, you can request for a certain reason to open negotiations and ask the individual unions if they would be willing to do that, because you needed to discuss X, kind of thing. It's usually opening it for a special reason, and there's a rationale for it.
Okay, so...
They can say no.
All right. But then they would show us where they're at, right?
They're going to say
Yeah,
no.
if
They're going to say no.
if that's considered winning, saying, no, I'm not going to do it, I'm not sure that's much of a victory.
Yeah.
I'm sure Chrysler and GM unions didn't want to go into bankruptcy, but they did everything to drive them into it.
Commissioner Klaus?
When I talked to Larry Fleece years ago, I seem to remember, I may be wrong, but he said that if you served as a commissioner for 8 years, that you were set up with health insurance for retirement. Is there any truth to that?
No,
Okay.
that is incorrect.
All right, so there's no past
Nothing.
commissioners?
No.
Just for that?
No.
Okay.
How many units do we have their contracts expiring at the end of this year?
I think 8, is it?
close?
I think 8.
And we had 4 last year, 2 of which were settled and 2 of which still remain open.
Correct.
So that's a total of 10 before the end of this year, before
Yeah,
our beginning
So
of
we'll
our-
get most of them, we'll be able to start negotiating for next year, most of them, by the end of this year.
So if we asked to reopen 6
Right,
months
there's-
before they would have been anyways, there may be some sort of room to work and have at least some
I don't think so.
conversations. No?
Based upon the unions that have the extended contract, I don't think we're going to get any movement. That's my personal opinion. I might be pleasantly surprised, but
Doesn't hurt to ask.
no.
Worst thing that happens is you're right where you are when you started.
Madam Chairman, couple
Yes.
of comments. One of the things when we talk about asking employees to pay a higher percentage of health care insurance is no one could have ever anticipated that health insurance was going to, increase by double digits every year for the last, 15 years. I just went through that with my employees. Very difficult discussion to make, particularly when at the same time you're saying, but I'm not going to give you a raise. So, that's always been the discussion is, we can get concessions on health care and those kind of things as long as we're talking about some sort of financial impetus, if you will, to cause that to happen, and so it's difficult to have that. Chris is right. The units that we have that are under contract are all 312 eligible, and trying to get those people to reopen those contracts.
They're not going to move.
Yeah, there's no benefit for them to open those contracts, and we've went through a few 312 arbitrations over the years, and we pretty much always lose.
Commissioner Klaus?
So with what we're talking about and where we're at, how close are we to finding ourselves needing an emergency manager? In that,
If we, in my opinion, if we don't do something immediately, and when I say immediately, I'm talking about the glacial speed of government within the next year.
so,
I think in another year and a half, we'll have one.
so is it my understanding?
That's my opinion. Tom, what, do you have?
Well, I'm a little bit more optimistic about things in general.
I'm so glad.
I didn't come here to put us into an emergency manager. I think if I can get some of these studies, and Mary's going to help me, and Paula Segala, and I think we can cut some operating costs. I can put that to lessening the amount. I think there are some things in the areas that we've had discretionary ability to spend money that we can take a look at per Mr. Crawford's, comments.
We are looking at our procurement and travel policy. We're tightening that. That's been a little on the
I'm exploring
loose side.
everything possible, even, I even got someone looking at if we sold this building and did a lease back at 8% to bring cash infusion in. I'm looking at every possible option I can think of to get us through this. What we're looking at is this hump, that if I can get us through this, it gets better in 224, 220, but I've got to get us through this interim period some way,
I have to share with everyone, I got a telephone call last week asking me if I was interested in selling my property. And the only property I could think of was something that I share with my sister, and because my name had just gone on the deed. And I said, well, what specific property are you looking to purchase from me? And he said, your property at 400 Boardman Avenue.
Yeah, I've got a couple of calls too.
And I started to laugh.
The word must be out. I got calls from Texas, they saying, are you interested in selling your building?
Are you talking about the governmental center?
Yeah.
And he said,
Might be a
well,
little
that's
too
400
complex a
Boardman
deal.
Avenue. And I said, would you be willing to buy the jail too? And he said, if it's 400 Boardman Avenue. And so I said, I'm not the person. Here's Mr. Menzel's number.
Yeah.
And Commissioner Klaus, what I'm trying to do is if we can get some of these structural changes in for the long term, so the trajectory goes down. If I can get into this operations, and I just wish I had more resources to do it, but get the operating costs down. If for discussion purposes, I'm 2 million short this year, but if I could save $1 million in operating, then I'm only asking for $1 million, you see. So what I'm trying to do is to get that number down so it's not so draconian on people, and I'm trying to spread it out. Probably, unfortunately, if everyone hates me, I'll have probably done the right thing because I've spread it out that everybody has a little bit of a sacrifice.
But other municipalities, while we've been giving raises every year, other municipalities have been digging themselves out of the hole. They have not been giving raises. They have, in fact, been giving pay cuts. Jen, you told me that Grand Rapids employees had to...
Several years ago, they took a significant reduction in their pay.
Yeah, significant. And so, I mean, it is extremely unusual for municipalities that have this problem to, not ask for some concessions and receive them. Dr. Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, part of what we need to look at too, we keep looking at this deficit we have, but we also need to get above that to dig ourselves out of this hole fast.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it, but we're going to have concessions from the employees. If not, we're going to be cutting jobs. There's no other way. I mean, I'll be as blunt as I can be. There's no other way around this right now. I mean, you could say increase revenue. Okay, where are we going to get that from? We're going to have employee concessions. We may end up cutting jobs, which I think we probably will, to dig out of this hole. No one has. They've been sweeping this under the rug for years now, and that is why when the counties that do look at it, they do start to make the radical changes. At this point, I agree. We're not going to be well liked. Who knows if we get reelected? But even if we don't, they're still going to have to be dealt with, because this problem's not going to go away. You can't continue yourself into a contract that is just digging a hole deeper without us being able to contribute more to it.
So we all need to start hating Tom.
Thank you.
We need to take care of him.
One of the things we have to remember, though, as we talk about asking for concessions and what we're paying our employees, take a second and look at how much difficulty we have trying to recruit qualified employees.
Yeah.
I know.
We have a huge problem, and if you want qualified employees to come here, you still have to compensate them fairly. We may end up with less employees. I firmly believe that's going to be the situation.
We will.
But personally, I'm very interested in making sure that we are properly compensating the employees that we have.
And that's why we're in this hole.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but that attitude has been going on for years, that we can't do this, and we're where we're at today because of that attitude. I mean, I just bluntly have to say that. It's, now we're at a point where we have to do something. So everything is on the table, including our pay.
I'm sensitive to...
Including our pay.
Put our pay on the table.
Yes, absolutely.
Tom, I would like you to share an important piece of information I think people should know, and maybe many know or maybe they don't, but you did reach out to MERS and look for an extension. You looked to spread this out. And tell everyone what you were told.
I've called Chris DeRose and talked to him a couple of times. He's the CEO of MERS, and said, I'm looking for a number of options to spread my ability to recover. And I said, could you give me 3 years more in the amortization? Could you give me 5? I think if you give me 5, lowering my payments, I can work this out with some of the other things I would do. And he said that he's very nice about it, don't get me wrong, but he said he didn't think his board would go for that. And the reason was that that 3 years that they gave us, he said there was agreement or an understanding, or at least a verbal understanding, that the county would make structural changes, and they did not, he said. And so we're not willing to go and give you another break because you didn't keep your word in the last one.
And I will tell you, I did not support that, freezing our MERS payment for 3 years.
2009, 10, 11, I believe.
vehemently opposed it. But I will also say, we were never told by administration that one of the conditions was this was an opportunity for us to make structural change. We were never told. Structural change should have been made, but, there was not proper communication with commissioners.
I would tell you that we're all very close to this, and sometimes it's emotional and very difficult. And due to the help of Gene Dorenzi, who's been very helpful and one of the people I've gone to get additional resources, we have a Blue Ribbon panel that's meeting next Monday from the business community, and they're all well-known names. I don't know if I could mention their names or not. She shook her head no, but they're well-respected business people to give us that good private sector look at it and another outside look at the situation and come up with some recommendations as well. So I'll get that information back to you, I hope within a week and a half, and that'll give you additional input in terms of options and what others are thinking. We're very close to it, and that's expected. And this would give us another point of view. I used that successfully with the Cherry Festival because, remember all the opposition I got? All we were making money was on the beer tent, and I needed to make more of the money to survive, and so I wanted to charge for entertainment in the open space, and of course, no, you can't do that. And did a Blue Ribbon panel, I said, boy, you better, you're going to be out of business soon. So it was very helpful in getting that outside objective analysis of that business model. So I thought that might work here to give us even more input in terms of the community involvement, per Commissioner Crawford wanting to get more people involved. That helps in that regard in terms of giving us a good another objective viewpoint on it.
All right. Commissioner Klaus.
Just one thing while we're throwing out all the options or some of the options. We have, I would look at us as we're property poor in our county. I mean, with the debt that we're in, and we have some great properties. We have Maple Bay, we have Twin Lakes, we have Power Island. None of them paying taxes, and all should be on the real estate roll.
You can't sell them.
I know we can't sell them.
We can't sell Maple
them the way
Bay.
they are right now. But my understanding with Chris Forsyth, if we went under emergency management, we could sell them, and it'd be gone. And it would clear up a lot of
I hope
millions.
that's not a basis for an emergency manager.
Well, I would hope not, but I mean, but it's millions that would go right down to pay MERS down, then we wouldn't be in as bad a spot.
That's kind of the nuclear option, but it's there.
I just always hate seeing property coming off the tax roll.
I think while we're talking about throwing out options, we also need to remember some things we can't do. And the number one thing is to reassure everybody on a pension right now that we cannot take away their pension. We do not want to
And
take
I
away their pension.
appreciate that.
I get emails and texts and messages
I was
almost
asked
every
last
day.
Friday by a recent retiree, are you going to take away my pension? I said, absolutely not.
A pension is a promise that cannot be broken. It has been upheld by the state Supreme Court. It is constitutionally protected. The problem is we are going to uphold that promise. So therefore, we have to figure out how to pay for it, and that's where we're at. We're on the other side. Another thing that's important to note is that we cannot raise taxes. The Headley Amendment precludes us from exceeding the 5 mil cap, and we are at 5 mils. So these are just some frequently asked questions. We cannot raise taxes, we cannot eliminate pensions, nor do we have any intention of doing that. And we have to seek the other avenues to fund these things. If we can't raise taxes and we need to pay our pensions, we have to fund it somewhere else. And that's where we start throwing out these ideas.
All right.
It's not a pleasant message that
We
we're
don't want
sharing,
any more emails about
but we needed to share that to let everyone understand where we are. And so when we do make difficult decisions, there'll be an understanding of why we're doing it, so.
And also that you have gone above and beyond trying to negotiate in every realm, but particularly with MERS. And we lost our chance with MERS. We promised them we would do something, we didn't do it, and I understand why now they don't want to believe us. I mean, you can cry wolf so many times and that's it. So I think it's important to know that these options were exercised, looked at, and as Chris mentioned too, with bonding for OPEBs, it's simply not allowed.
I think Commissioner Johnson said to me that he went through a program on that, and they are a monopoly. I mean, we have no option, you know, and for example, if the Treasury Department said, all right, we'll take over your defined benefits just as an option to MERS, and municipalities could move and they'll say, well, we want you to pay it, but we're going to give you 20 years, and we want the payments made every year. That would change it. But without a competitive option, MERS can dictate exactly what they want, and they dictate it, and you have to meet those obligations.
Dr. Johnson, did you have anything?
Yeah, are we going to set any timelines to try to get some of this started, I guess, and to bring back to us? I know you've got a lot on your plate right now, but I'd like to have some type of time frame to say we'd like to see something preliminary, I guess.
April, okay. April.
Okay.
All right.
And I did speak to MERS. I told them they should have it about 6% return, and apparently I'm not the only one telling them that, but can you imagine how big our unfunded would be if it went to a 6%?
The other thing, I was talking to Mary about this, I've never been able to find out what the administrative costs are. I mean, if they're saying they're making 5.7, you know, what's it costing me to make 5.7? Because I know I'm not making 5.7 because you got administrative costs in there, and I can't get that number either.
Don't forget what Chris Radu said, that there's another percentage on top of that. So it's not just 8%, it's 12%. So,
If we bond.
yeah, we just can't do it.
I'm going to give you Mr. Radu's email. He is extraordinarily knowledgeable about pensions. That's what he does for a living, and bonds and the markets, and he has offered to help for free. So I will email you his email, and perhaps you would take a few minutes and meet with him, and
I'm looking for solutions. I'm very, very receptive to any of
he's an
that.
extraordinarily brilliant young man. Anything else before I open the second public comment?
Does Tom need any sort of motions or anything that you need?
Well, I think it's pretty clear we need to do something, so
Yeah.
it's okay.
All right, this is our second opportunity for public comment. Please step forward, and no need to read the rules. I think everybody here heard them the first time. Please, come on forward.
I need to give my name and stuff again.
Yes, please.
William Heike, 3196 College Terrace Court. And I think it's time for you guys to start playing hardball and tax every piece of property in Grand Traverse County. I don't care if it's charity, if it's public, if it's government, whatever it is, they should all be paying taxes that will give you revenue. And you can't raise taxes, but you sure can tax people that are not paying any on their property. And, you know, these churches and these charities are all doing quite well. The bottom line is, if we tax their property, we'll get more money.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Dave, please come on up.
My name is David Lather, 2010 Arrowhead Drive in Traverse City. I pretty much weighed in on this subject in the Sunday's paper. Michael wrote an article about it, and I didn't have an answer, but as a result of that article, I've had a couple people ask me, they said, you know, if the board could convince us that they've cut everything to the bone and can't go any farther, and we still expect services, we need to vote ourselves a millage increase. I know that I'm probably walking on ground that I'm going to get hung on, but anyway, that's not a popular thing, but I think if you can convince the public, maybe we could vote us a short-term millage increase to get us over this hump. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Gilman.
Michael Gilman, 5226 Hazelnut Court, Garfield Township, formerly of Traverse City. As your chair indicated earlier, I spent quite a bit of time with this issue over the last several years. It started in 2007 when I was a member of the unlamented COFAC committee, and continued through the 4 years I spent on the city commission. During that last period of time, I was distinctly uninclined to worry about where our next bicycle path was going to be, so I was stuck with worrying about minor things like pensions. And the city's separate liability, which isn't as big as this, but is still appreciable. In the course of that, I came to understand that defined benefit pensions, by definition, are unsustainable. Okay. The private sector came to that conclusion back in the 80s. In the late 90s, a few municipalities came to that conclusion. And one of them was Grand Traverse County, but the other one, and I'd appreciate Mrs. Lanoy if she perhaps would look into this, is not on your list of 66 counties that are part of MERS, and that's Oakland County. Because I gave a lot of credit to Grand Traverse County in my presentations to the city. I pointed out that in 1997, I believe it was, Grand Traverse County switched from defined benefit programs to defined contribution programs, which is a step in the right direction. But something else had to have happened over that period of time, because simultaneously, Oakland County made the same change. Oakland County is nearly 100% funded now, and I think somebody has got to explore with its finance director what they did and what we didn't do, because this is a big debt. Through all the discussion today, I think there's one message that maybe got blurred, but the message the public has to have is this county owes $50 million plus for services already rendered, not future services, for services already rendered. That's a bill. That's a bill you're going to have to pay, and it's going to have to be paid somehow by your employees, your taxpayers, or the recipients of your pensions. You have to make those tough decisions, and those are very hard decisions. I don't envy you making them, because in a political setting, you can't be popular by saying no to anybody. It's my impression that your commission, perhaps unlike many past commissions, has got the fortitude to make those tough decisions, and I sure hope you do make them, because this debt is only going to get bigger. And as one of the speakers before me indicated, I think it was Mr. Johnson, if the MERS program ever reduces its anticipated return from the 8% to the 6% that's a lot more likely, this debt is going to be even bigger. And so I don't envy you your job, but you've got to tell the public you owe $50 million and it's going to come out of somebody's hide. And it's going to, and you have to make the decision whose.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Education.
Jason Gilman, 933 Avenue D. I have to agree with my father, Mike. You already have an emergency manager. It's Tom Menzel. And you're dealing with it much in the way that an emergency manager would take care of it. I will say this, I caught a look from Chris Maxbar. I'm going to have to have a mea culpa moment here. I had an opportunity to tie-break a vote that would have given us results-based budgeting when I was a commissioner. And I hemmed and I hawed and I didn't go with it. And the reason I didn't go with it was because I was afraid of, A, the $20,000 cost for implementing it or for guiding it through, and what I thought was a complicated and expensive otherwise charrette procedure, much in the way that Carol suggests, have the public come and tell us what they want. We're past the time where the public can come and tell us what they want. Okay, you're making the right decision starting off by saying, look, commissioners don't get paid. I think that's a good way to go to start, at least to build the trust with the employees whom you have to go to. Bottom line is, in the end, you've already got an emergency manager, and the next step is bankruptcy court, and that's where those contracts get hurt. So those employees have to come forward and work with you as well as you working with them. And really, the $50 million you owe it. Okay, we owe it. And then we have to take care of that obligation. But anyhow, best of luck to you.
I-
It's
I
a couple
wa-
decades in the making.
You
but-
you saw the beams
Oh,
going at you.
I saw the look right away.
What I was talking about, and the board said they could do it themselves, and I was going,
But really, you've got a really heavy load on you, and you're just going to have to not be afraid to make some hard decisions. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Charles Soul, 608 Webster Street, Traverse City. My one question is there any municipality or entity of record in our state or the other 49 that have dug themselves out of this deep of a hole? I haven't seen any kind of results of any other comparison. I was just wondering if anybody knew that.
We generally, Mr. Soul, we generally don't respond to questions, but I would be more than happy to talk with you after the meeting. And I have to ask, did your dad work for Shell? I knew him well.
My name is Deborah Deering, 439 Sierra Drive, Traverse City. I've worked for the county for over 30 years as a public health nurse. And I do lots of really great programs at the county that a lot of people might not think that it's important, but they are important. So I know that safety is always number one, but public health is very important as well. And we take care of the poorest people in your county. And I have worked extremely hard for 30 years, taking care of lots and lots of people and making sure they have healthy pregnancies and healthy babies. And I have not been getting great raises. You guys act like we're getting paid very well. I get paid much less than a hospital nurse. I have taken no pay raises or very little pay raises for many, many years in exchange for a good benefit pension package. I started in 1985, and we were told through the years, if you do this, when you retire at 55, I can't retire now, I'm 57. I would have loved to retire at 55, but I can't afford health insurance. It would cost $900 a month for me and my husband at the county rate to pay for health insurance. That's a lot of money. And so if you're going to retire, and now you're going to ask us to pay more co-pays, and then you're going to ask our unions to break a contract. I'm also a union person, and I've been to many contract negotiations. And I got to tell you, I can't imagine anybody would vote, yes, let's open up our contract and let's start paying more money when we're not making a lot of money. I know the general public thinks we make so much money. Well, we don't. That's the truth. So, I'm so glad I came tonight, so now I can better explain what the problem is to my coworkers. This has been a great education. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. LaPointe?
Gordy LaPointe, 6375 Plum Drive in Acme Township. The first comment I'd like to mention is that it's good to hear that it appears like everything's on the table, and I think that's the only way you can pursue this, is say literally everything's on the table. I think the proposal of perhaps the commissioners taking a no salary for a period of time until this is resolved sends a good message to people about your willingness to participate in this. Because I think shared sacrifice is what everybody wants to see. If they sense everybody is sharing in this, they'll be much more willing to participate. And the comment about a tax going forward, if anyone's ever talked to me, I am so opposed to tax increases. However, if I firmly believe you've taken all the reasonable steps you can to get the cost in line, and there was additional taxes required that were going to be spent wisely, don't quote me on this, but I'd be willing to support that. The last comment,
I want to take a picture
the last
right now.
comment
Yes.
is, I think it's important you focus on all the things that are really within the possibility of making changes. And just for your information, I've heard twice now over the last couple of years about selling Maple Bay. You can't sell Maple Bay. It was bought with trust money from the state. You can't sell it, so don't spend any time going there. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Oh, okay.
I'm Jamie Beck, 359 Timbercrest Drive for 22 years. And I also work at the Health Department with Deb, and I've been there 20 years. And I live paycheck to paycheck, like most people, and I can't afford any, thing taken away from, or pay more or do anything like that. And I pay $4,500 in taxes on the peninsula, so, I don't know how I can expect to take any more out of what I earn or pay any more for insurance. Maybe I have to sell my house, I don't know. But anyways, I'd like to thank the board especially. I work for Children's Special Health Care, and I've heard a lot of the board members that do special things for our clients in the community. Christine Max Bauer is one of them. And Ross Childs is also another one. So I would just like to put a good word in for Ross Child. He does help the community a lot in his retirement.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I don't see anything. I do want to, I will be very brief. As you know, I went to the governor's Education and Economic Summit yesterday, and I spoke very briefly with the governor. I thanked him for our revenue sharing. We received from the state of Michigan $1.7 million in revenue sharing, I believe it is this year. And I told him how imperative, how important it was that the legislature in his budget continue the revenue sharing for the counties. And I also met with 2 members of his staff, and they have asked to meet with me in a couple weeks, and we are going to be talking about pensions. And I will share that discussion with you after I have it. Anyone else? All right.
I have a brief thing. I just wanted to say Chris Erickson is here. Our Parks Business Development team met today. And as you know, we are trying to replace our playground at the Civic Center, and it is with 0 county tax dollars at all. And part of that process and having our funders come forward, we've had some generous funders in the community want to step forward and help. We're going to have a public hearing component so that they can hear what people in the community want. And it will be a week from tomorrow at 6:30 here in Chambers. We'll have a public hearing. 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock. This is why she's here. 5 o'clock here in Chambers. We're going to have a special public hearing. We'll have some designs up that have been chosen by the business development team, and we want citizens can come in and let us know what they're interested in. And another component of that will be an online survey, and Chris will be meeting with the news tomorrow to get out. This survey will be on our Parks Facebook page and located in other places, and people will be able to know how to go online and look at those components as well. But we just want to make sure everybody knows, public hearing next Thursday, 5 o'clock, here in Chambers.
Okay.
Is it?
We are adjourned.